In May of 2026, two climbers reached the summit of Mount Everest, the highest point on the planet, the dream they had been chasing for years. Neither of them survived the descent. That same season, on the same mountain, three more lost their lives. And one more climber was pulled out of a crevasse alive, in a place where others could no longer be reached. And through all of this, the spring of 2026 became the most successful season in the entire history of Everest. More than 900 ascents, a number never seen before, triumph and tragedy, a record and a death. On the very same days in May, on the very same mountain. So, how will this season go down in history? As record-breaking or as deadly? And can the two even be told apart at all? We'll tell you now. These are the final days of the season on Everest. The spring of 2026 made history on Everest before it had even ended. In a single season, more than 900 successful ascents were made to the summit of the highest mountain on the planet. Never before had this many people climbed here. It is an absolute record for all the time that humankind has been storming this mountain. And here lies a real paradox. Despite the crowds, Everest today is safer than it was decades ago. If you count by the share of those who die, the odds of coming back from the mountain alive are now higher than ever before. And yet this record season took 5 lives. 3 of those who died were Nepali high-altitude workers, and we'll tell their stories separately. 2 others were climbers from India, and it is to them that today's episode is dedicated. And one more climber, in those very same days, fell into a crevasse, and, unlike them, she stayed alive. A record crowd, loud victories, and 5 ascents cut short, all of it packed into a few weeks of May on one and the same mountain, and behind it stands a question we'll try to answer today. What was there more of on Everest in 2026, triumph or disaster? And could it be that here, one is impossible without the other? To understand why people die on the mountain, you first have to see what was happening on Everest during those days in May. On the 20th of May, 274 people reached the summit in a single day. That's a record for the Nepali side. There had never been this many climbers on the roof of the world at once. And the day before, on the 19th of May, a queue formed along the route nearly 5 kilometers long. A living chain of people stretched out between the 2nd and 4th camps. Picture that scene. Hundreds of people standing almost motionless for hours, in bitter cold, at an altitude where there is 3 times less oxygen than at sea level, and every minute in a queue like that works against you. It is time spent. It is oxygen melting away in the cylinder on your back. It is a narrowing window in which you have to manage not only to climb up, but, most importantly, to climb back down. And in a crowd like that, something kicks in that climbers call summit fever. When the goal is only a few hundred meters away, when behind you lie weeks of preparation, years of dreaming, and tens of thousands of dollars, turning back becomes almost impossible, even when the body is already sending signals that it's time to stop. That is exactly how, in this queue, 2 climbers from India were making their way up. Both already felt unwell, and both kept climbing anyway. Both reached the summit, and neither one survived the descent. The first of them was named Arun Tiwari, 53 years old, an information technology specialist from the Indian city of Hyderabad. Everest had long been his dream, and not an easy one. A year earlier, Tiwari had already tried to reach the summit, but back then he was forced to turn back at an altitude of around 7,200 meters. For a climber, that is a painful defeat. And in the spring of 2026, he came back to finish what he had started. On the 21st of May, the dream came true. Tiwari reached the summit as part of an expedition run by the company Pioneer Adventures. He stood on the highest point on the planet, the place he had striven toward for so long. But Everest is at its most dangerous not on the way up, but on the way down. And already on his way down, Tiwari began to develop high-altitude pulmonary edema, a severe condition in which the body finds it harder and harder to take in oxygen in a place where there is already catastrophically little of it. At such heights, this is extremely dangerous. A helicopter cannot climb this high, and a sick climber can only be brought down by hand, by the strength of his companions. His strength left him at the Hillary Step, right by the summit he had just conquered. 4 Sherpas managed to reach him. They tried to bring him lower, gave him extra oxygen, but there was nothing more they could do. By the morning of the 22nd of May, Arun Tiwari, had stopped answering on the radio. To bring the body down by hand, the company asked the family for about $100,000. His relatives did not have that kind of money, and they made what was perhaps the hardest decision of their lives, to leave him up there, where his dream had been. The second climber was named Sandeep Are, also from India, also an information technology specialist, originally from the city of Hindupur, but for the last few years he had been living in Phoenix in the United States. In life, Are was a yogi, a calm and disciplined man, and in the mountains, a truly experienced climber. Behind him lay Aconcagua, Kilimanjaro, serious training on ice and rock. Once his parents had been against his passion and feared for him, but the mountains had long become the main pursuit of Are's life. He left behind a family at home. On the 20th of May, he reached the summit of Everest as part of the very same Pioneer Adventures team as Tiwari, 2 men, 1 operator, the very same days. And then he was undone by something rarely mentioned in stories of death at altitude. Right after the summit, Are developed snow blindness, a temporary loss of vision caused by the bright light at high altitude. Because of this, a climber can no longer descend on his own and depends entirely on the help of his companions. In the death zone, that sharply reduces the chances of rescue. In response to the distress call, 5 Sherpas climbed up to the south summit and began the descent. They had to guide Are down nearly 2,500 meters, first through the death zone, then lower. This descent lasted 2 whole days. 2 days of fighting for another person's life at the very limit of human strength. But Sandeep Are reached the second camp already at the end of his strength. There he died, falling just short of a safe altitude. His body was brought down from the mountain. A few days later, Sandeep Are was buried in the Indian city of Bangalore, but not every misfortune in those days ended the same way. There, where Sandeep Are was carried down for 2 days and still could not be saved, another story unfolded in those same days, one that ended in rescue. The Nepali climber Upasana Gurung was making her way along the route from the first camp to the second, an ordinary crossing, the kind that happens many times during an expedition, on a stretch that isn't even considered especially dangerous. But that is exactly where the trap lies. Beneath the even, calm-looking snow-hide crevasses, deep fissures that cannot be seen until it is too late. On the 18th of May, Upasana fell into one of those crevasses, the depth about 50 meters, and she was truly lucky. In the fall, she escaped serious injury. After that, everything came down to time. 2 teams set out to help at once, her own expedition with the company 8K Expeditions, and climbers from the Austrian outfit, Furtenbach Adventures. Joining forces, the rescuers managed to pull Upasana out of the crevasse before darkness fell. And that same evening, a helicopter lifted her off the mountain and carried her down to safety. She survived, on the very same mountain and in the very same days when 2 others could not. But let us return to those 2 who had less luck. Arun Tiwari remained on the mountain, and in that, sadly, he is far from the first. By various estimates, more than 200 people have remained forever on the slopes of Everest. Bringing them down is not always possible, and the main reason is precisely the altitude. A helicopter cannot climb higher than the second camp, and that is about 6,500 meters. Everything above that is simply out of reach for aircraft. Bringing a body down from the 8,000-meter zone is, in essence, an expedition in itself. It takes a team of several Sherpas, several days of grueling work, and, hardest of all, a real risk to the lives of those who climb up for the body. In saving the dead, you can lose the living. And so, a great many remain there, in the place where misfortune found them. And it is here that the fates of our 2 men finally diverge. Sandeep Are, as strange as it may sound, was in some sense the more fortunate. He died not in the death zone, but near the second camp, in a place where a helicopter can still land. And so, one of them was buried below, among his loved ones, while the other was left lying at the Hillary Step. Between these 2 points lies more than 2,000 meters of altitude, and an invisible line that decides whether a person comes home or stays on the slope forever. For the family, this is no longer a choice of whether to bury him or not. It is a choice of what to even consider the end. Here it is worth paying attention to one detail. Both Tiwari and Are climbed with one and the same company, Pioneer Adventures. And this is not at all about placing blame on anyone. Both died of altitude sickness on the descent after a successful climb, and the team's Sherpas tried to save them right up to the last. The point is something else. This very season shows clearly just how much Everest has changed. Long gone are the days when climbing was the domain of rare, solitary pioneers, risking everything for the idea itself. Today, the climb up Everest is an entire industry, with a schedule, a service, and a clear price list. And the numbers here speak for themselves. The climb costs a client, on average, somewhere between $40,000 and $100,000. The permit to climb the mountain alone costs $15,000. And in 2026, Nepal issued nearly 500 such permits, more than ever before in its entire history. As a result, hundreds of people ended up on the slopes at the same time, and far from all of them come here with serious mountaineering experience behind them. And that is where the main pattern lies. The more accessible the summit becomes for money, the more there are, on the mountain, who have overestimated their own strength. Modern technology, Sherpas, oxygen, and fixed ropes make the climb easier, but they do not cancel out the altitude itself. Almost anyone with the necessary sum can climb Everest today. But coming back down is something the mountain still does not grant to everyone. The loud stories of clients often overshadow those who die quietly and those who die first. After all, even before the main summit days of this season, the mountain had already taken 3 Nepali high-altitude workers, and they deserve to be named. On the 3rd of May, still only on the approach to base camp, Lakpa Dendi Sherpa passed away, a 52-year-old guide and a most experienced high-altitude worker. On the 10th of May, in the Khumbu Icefall, Bijaya Bishwakarma died, a man who had earlier made history as the first Nepali from the Dalit caste to climb Everest. And on the 11th of May, on the slope of Lhotse, 20-year-old Furagyalzen Sherpa fell, the grandson of the legendary Kami Rita, the very one who climbed Everest 10 times and became famous for ascents without oxygen. Notice this. All 3 died not on the summit, but lower down on the mountain, in the place where they were preparing the way for those who would climb after them, fixing ropes, setting up crossings over the crevasses. And this is not chance, but a hard rule. A major study from 2026 confirms it. More than 3/4 of clients die high up, on summit day and on the descent. But more than 80% of deaths among Sherpas happen during the preparation of the route, much lower down. What's more, on the descent from the summit itself, clients die 8 times more often than Sherpas. So, it turns out the mountain is dangerous for everyone, but it is dangerous in different ways, for those who pay for the climb, and for those who are paid to make that climb possible. And yet, that very mountain, which took 5 lives, in those very same days gave the world a whole series of truly historic records. The Pole Bartek Ziemski did what no one had done before. Without oxygen, he skied down first from the summit of Lhotse, and then from Everest itself, and became the first person in history to conquer 2 8,000ers on skis in a single season. The Briton Kenton Cool reached the summit of Everest for the 20th time, an absolute record for a climber who is not a Sherpa. The Australian Oliver Foran traveled from the ocean shore to the highest point on the planet in just 50 days, breaking the previous record for the sea-to-summit route. And the 18-year-old Australian Bianca Adler became the youngest person from her country to set foot on the roof of the world. But the central figure of this season is the Sherpa Kami Rita. In 2026, he climbed Everest for the 32nd time, more than anyone on the planet in all of history. And here is what is telling. It was he, having come down from this record-breaking climb, who said something everyone ought to hear. There are too many people on the mountain, and it is time for the state to start limiting it. It turns out to be almost symbolic. The record and the warning came from one and the same lips, on that very same overcrowded mountain. By the last days of May, the season was already winding down. The main crowd had drained away, and on the emptied mountain only the lone climbers remained. This is a special breed of climber, the ones who need the mountain empty. Those who climb without oxygen, going to the very limit of human ability, and the speedrunners hunting for time records. They deliberately waited until the main flow had drained away. But the weather changed. The calm, clear days of mid-May gave way to storms and gale-force winds. And one by one, these daring souls turned back, never reaching the summit. The Lithuanian Saulius Damulevicius, who fell ill on the descent, had to be airlifted off the mountain, Only the American Tyler Andrews managed to put a striking full stop on it. He set a speed record, reaching the summit in less than 10 hours. And on the 29th of May, in the Khumbu Icefall, the last ladders and ropes were taken down. That is the official end of the season. The route closed, the camps were packed up, and the mountain was once again left alone, until the next spring. So, what did this season turn out to be in the end? Record-breaking or deadly? It closes with two figures standing side by side. On one hand, more than 900 ascents, an absolute historic maximum. On the other, 5 lives cut short. But here is what matters in order to see the whole picture. 5 is exactly the number Everest takes in an ordinary average year. In other words, the record crowd did not turn into a surge of tragedies. It produced the most ordinary average death rate. What's more, if you count by the share of those who die, the mountain today is twice as safe as it was 20 years ago. From the point of view of dry statistics, it all adds up. Everest in 2026 is a success, the most successful season in history. And yet, behind every figure in these statistics stand living people. Arun Tiwari, left near the summit, Sandeep Are, who fell just short of a safe altitude, and 3 Nepalese Sherpas who never came home. So, record-breaking or deadly? The truth is that here, one does not argue with the other. The record and the tragedy do not contradict each other. They simply happened on the same days, on the same mountain. Everest this season too stayed true to itself. It gave people both loud victories and heavy losses in equal measure, as it always has here.